So, welcome, dear friends, to this final Gems from the Wisdom Tradition Circle meeting for 2025, in which we have been taking up the theme for the year of light on the path, and hence the quote that we've used on the back of the 2025 almanac of growing luminous, which we thank Diana Bonici very much for having read to us. As we close out this year, we're going to take up the topic with Carolyn Dorrance, Dr. Carolyn Dorrance, of women and men of peace. Carolyn is a scholar. She was a professor for many, many years of her life in philosophy, history, women's studies, a number of different fields of the social sciences. And she's a very incisive thinker. She's also someone with a deep care for the human condition. And in that capacity, she served as the president of the Institute of World Culture for several decades. We're so privileged to have Carolyn presenting for us today on this idea of men or women and men of peace from the tradition of the Nobel Peace Prize. I'm going to let Carolyn just dive straight into it.
Okay. Good evening, and I hope you find this topic as interesting and even exciting as I did as I delved into it. And it's a very important topic. The Nobel Peace Prize is my focus, and we'll share with you a few of the goals of it and the changing goals and the some of the winners. There are 106, I think. No, it's been awarded 106 times to 143 winners. Sometimes there's two. And 112 are individuals and 31 are organizations. So it's a very busy organization. The Nobel Peace Prize organization is the birthchild of Alfred Nobel, who was first known for his invention of dynamite and bauxite, and later came to regret when he thought a few organizations would need it for some reason, but it became a big bestseller, and within 5 years he was just horrified about its widespread purchase by various governments and organizations. He gave birth to the organization of Nobel Peace in his will. He died in 1896, and he had different versions, but he was persuaded by a long-term friend and correspondent, Bertha von Suttner, an Austrian, who was one of the many activists that were very intensely involved in trying to develop international peace and end war. There have been a lot of wars in the second half of the 19th century. And so she was one of them, and she persuaded Alfred to include peace as one of the prizes, the other four being physics, chemistry, psychology, and literature. And he also made sure that the prize could be awarded to women. So that was all set. After he died, those who were interested started up the organization in 1901. And in his will, he said that the prize should be awarded annually to a person who has done the most or best work for fraternity between nations, for the abolition and reduction of standing armies, which was a big issue at that time, and for the holding and promotion of peace congresses. Now you see that those aims are pretty much focused on reducing wars and promoting peace. And one purpose of my talk today will to show how the aims of this organization have been expanded and changed rather drastically. And that is shown in the most recent award, December 10th, 2025, to Maria Corina Machado, a Venezuelan who is the opposition leader. She united the different factions to do something to try to remove the current president from his position of tyranny. And she was awarded the prize for promoting democratic rights. And that included both human rights and peaceful coalitions. And it was very much a focus on what her experience inside Venezuela in domestic politics. And it was, her nomination was criticized as saying, well, what's this got to do with international peace? She's not doing anything for the globe, really. She's just trying to fight a battle within one country. But the committee disagreed and thought that her battle and her demonstration of what they called courageous citizenship, and that became a new category within the piece, that somebody who was really working for democracy and for human rights could be considered. And that's in 2025. There's a bit of a long path to get to that change, which included moving towards the definition of international peace and stability and justice by means of diplomacy, and international participation in international agreements, and later human rights. So, and we'll show more about that. Peace negotiations, democracy, human rights, and even the inclusion of climate, which Barack Obama was rewarded for. So that is a basic reality, that the definition of peace and the progress towards peace is much broader than the original focus on armies and fraternity between nations interpreted as national governments. There have been, just tell you the basic statistics, there have been 93 men who've received the focus and only 20 women. So there's definitely an imbalance there. But if you look at since 1992, there have been 12 women who've received the prize, and most of them from other countries than the United States, which in total has earned 23 rewards. So let me pick out a few examples of winners, and I'm sure you have questions and comments that you could make. It is true, you get a tremendous sense of what people were worried about and concerned about. The first winners in 1901 were Henry Durant and Frederica Passy, and Henry Durant was very concerned with the wounded and who in wars. There'd been so many wars, and they were just left on the battlefield. They didn't get medical care. If they survived, they didn't get housing or food or any kind of assistance whatsoever. And he insisted that there should be humanitarian support to the wounded, to the homeless, and to give in a sense to give a blessing to their recovery from participating in war. And the other winner in 1901 was we need more peace conferences, diplomacy, and arbitration, which would include more than just people involved in armies. The first woman, Bertha von Suttner of Austria, she was given the prize for her audacity to oppose the horrors of war, which is not what women are supposed to be doing. But she was the friend that nourished Alfred in his dying days to expand the who could be the winners and what would be the aims. There have been four sitting presidents. We'll just mention them. Theodore Roosevelt, for what was his work in bringing peace to and an end to the Japanese and Russian war, which we don't know anything about it, was off the coast of China in 1905. It was a bloody war, and it was seen as a war between the ascent of Asia versus Europe and the United States. And a lot of publicity, a lot of concern, and he brought the war to an end. And that's seen as, given all these other things, which were not so peaceful, that was why he got the prize. There is also the second woman to get the second politician was Woodrow Wilson, the central founder of the League of Nations that was put together after the end of World War I, which horrified people because it was such a bloody war with so much loss of life. At the same time, the International Committee of the Red Cross was organized, and it won the prize over the decades 3 times. So after Wilson, there was a bit of a absence. Well, there were a few, Charles Dawes, or the so-called Dawes Plan. Can't mention everybody. But one of the second woman, and one that was very, very much earned it, Jane Addams, who was known for her work at Hull House, but when World War I broke out, she put all her energy into trying to bring about peace and stop war. And she actually helped found should have that right here. She found an organization in 1915 that was designed to bring peace. So that was seen as an accomplishment. But the International League for Peace and Freedom, which sought to disarm countries. And she was the one who began a shift in focus. And I wanted to read a little bit. If you go online, and you can find all kinds of information online, putting together different lists, there's about 155 quotes from Jane Addams that you can easily find. And I think she summed up the perspective that was emerging. This is in the 1920s and 30s. And so I think it's important to see this statement by her. I believe that peace is not merely an absence of war, but the nurture of human life, and that in this time, this nurture would do away with war as a natural process. We must also remember that peace has come to mean a larger thing. It is no longer merely absence of war, but the unfolding of life processes which are making for a common development. Peace is not merely something to hold congresses about and to discuss it as an abstract dogma. It has come to be a rising tide of moral feeling which is slowly engulfing all pride of conquest and making war impossible. Under this new conception of peace, it is perhaps natural that the first men to formulate it and give it international meaning should have been working men who have always realized, however feebly and vaguely, that they may have expressed it. That is, they who in all ages have borne the heaviest burden of privation and suffering imposed on the world by the military spirit. So that's a current of, we have to look at the humanitarian consequences of war and the conditions of poverty, homelessness, injustice, and the violence that may come from governments that way. That's a current, I mean, it's an idea, and it's a direction that will gain development in the decades ahead. So she wanted people to renew their assiduous effort to revive the ideal of peace and to rekindle the spirit of peace in their own nation, in the whole of mankind. And the word mankind actually got changed to humankind, but that's what we should be. That should be our aim, not just responding to wars. During World War II, there was no award. There were people who were peacekeepers from the United States as others. The Quakers won one year. Ralph Bunche and Albert Schweitzer, they won. George Marshall for the Marshall Plan and all his other work during World War II to keep the United States government focused on a peaceful solution and peaceful response to the horrors of the war. There, Dag Hammarskjöld, the leader in the United Nations, he was awarded it. Martin Luther King Jr. won it in 1964 for his nonviolent struggle for civil rights for the Afro-American population. United Nations Children's Fund won it. Henry Kissinger won it. Very controversial because his work as Secretary of State got associated with policies that were which were quite controversial. It's interesting that the negotiator from North Vietnam, Le Duc Tho, was awarded it along with Kissinger and refused to accept it. So that's the only refusal to accept it. The leaders, two women won it in 1976 for their courageous efforts to bring the violent conflict in Northern Ireland settled, and their participation in the negotiations was absolutely central to a change in political dynamics. There's just so many. It's just inspiring to all these people. Desmond Tutu, he wanted, as did later the Nelson Mandela in South Africa there. The Dalai Lama won it in 1989. In fact, he was in Santa Barbara when he heard the announcement, and they made an exception for him. In some way, they didn't know, they weren't sure that he had fully earned it in a global way, but one of the admitted huge omissions that the leadership of the Nobel Committee has acknowledged is their failure to give the award to Mahatma Gandhi. He had been nominated 5 times, but he was assassinated 4 days before the deadline of February 1st to nominate people. And they later admitted that they made an exception uh, in a few cases, and they should have they definitely should have given him the award. So in the award to the Dalai Lama, they included a whole paragraph about Mahatma Gandhi and his uh, promotion of nonviolence, and said that he should have gotten an award then. Um, Mikhail Gorbachev, Aung San Suu, the woman in Burma who's trying to bring some nonviolence and peace to her country, and was blocked in every way the government could figure out how to do it. Um, you have the Peace Prize going to the trio that created the first modern peace agreement in the Middle East, Arafat, Yitzhak Rabin, and Shimon Peres. And you also had to what's called Pugwash, an actual conference to promote the restraint and elimination of nuclear arms. So that was there. One you might remember, because it was a real breakthrough in giving the award to just an ordinary person, nothing to do with organizations or governments or diplomats or whatever. And I remember when she got it, it was so breathtaking. Jody Williams, she helped organize the international campaign against landmines, and was trying and to ban and clear anti-personal mines, but primarily in West Africa, which in all the civil wars that had been going on there had been planted and were preventing the residents of several countries from moving out and planting and growing food for themselves. So she won it, and that organization, as far as I know, is still working. And that just shows you, again, the kind of expansion of the sense of duty. Doctors Without Borders has won it. Um, the United Nations as a whole has won it. Kofi Annan, who was not, who always had a lot of criticism around him, but did something to really regenerate the United Nations at a critical time, and would go out on a limb to promote that regeneration. Jimmy Carter won it. Um, and then we have, beginning in 2003, we see more women showing up, including Shirin Ebadi, who was given it for her efforts for democracy and human rights. Especially, she focused on the rights of women and children. And the next year, 2004, Wangari Maathai of Kenya, again, for her contribution to sustainable development, democracy, and peace. She helped organize the women, the restoration of forests, so that that could be a source of um, better living, and the whole water system. She got the women of Kenya motivated to be part of the development of their society, and at a time when the government was not doing much for rural conditions and rural settlements. You have Mohammed Yunus. You might have paid a lot of attention to him in Bangladesh, and to his bank. That was a separate award, Grameen Bank. Um, so he got the award in 2006. Al Gore won it, and for him, it was for his efforts to build up and disseminate greater knowledge about man-made climate change, and to lay the foundations for the measures that are needed to counteract such change. Now you see how far we're moving away from just focusing on war and settling wars, preventing wars. Barack Obama received it 2009, and there's a lot of criticism because the deadline for nominating people is February 1st, and he'd only been in office for 2 weeks or something. And so people say, well, he hasn't done anything yet, and that's been an issue. Should we reward people for their aspirations or for their accomplishments. So, and obviously he would have political flack coming from within his own country, but his commendation was his extraordinary efforts to strengthen international diplomacy and cooperation between peoples, and also for his advocacy and support for doing something about climate change and bringing that into the you might say the agenda for international action, which, as we all know, has been thwarted from time to time rather strongly. There was
Carolyn, we're getting close to our.
I'm about to end this, okay?
Okay.
There was a nonviolent struggle for the safety of women and women's right to full participation in peace building work. There were two women from Liberia and someone from Yemen. And then just I think two more. Malaya Yousafzai, and from Pakistan. She got it, the youngest winner for the struggle against the suppression of children and young people, and from the right of all children to education. And if you're reading about, there was a woman in Iraq, as what's also happening as the decades go on is an attention of victory going to people from all over the world, and not just from the United States and England. And just one more, aside from Maria Corina Machado, who just got it, Narges Mohammed from Iran. She's in the news right now because the Iranian government is taking her back to prison. She was given a leave of, for medical reasons a year ago, December, and now they have said that she has to go back to prison. And so that she was known, she was an actress, and that was her thing, and but she became very involved in the fight to promote human rights and freedom for all. So those are some quickly mentioned, but examples. But you can see a great variety of human beings have been recognized as now, and that the original focus of Alfred Nobel is still honored, but there's much greater acceptance that all of the debilitating conditions that human beings are suffering from should be addressed, and that individuals, some of whom have no big status, are initiating activity to do just that. Okay, I'll stop there.
Wow, that was quite an amazing array of individuals and organizations who won this very significant prize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't mention a lot of the organizations that have been received the prize, but that is part of what they did, and that shows again, it shows a freedom for people being recognized, that people who've just had their conscience jarred have gone out and done something that no government asked them to do, but they've done something and developed it into a powerful influence for peace.
Mm-hmm. And I'm noticing how the timing of this beginning, well, his will, I guess he passed the very end of the 1800s, and then I guess they started awarding the prize in the early 1900s, and that corresponds very closely to what's considered the beginning of the Aquarian Age, and a whole new way of thinking for the human race. So how interesting that even with all the tyranny that continues to go on, there's a huge international recognition of the value of someone who promotes peace.
Yeah.
that doesn't, and it's worldwide recognition.
Yeah.
It,
And an international organization recognizes these efforts by individuals and organizations that governments would just ignore and turn a blind eye to.
right. Um, one would think that the individuals who receive the award would, in many cases, be awarded also a certain measure of protection, which may be being challenged right now with the two most recent female recipients. But nevertheless, one thinks, for example, of the youngest to have received Malala in Pakistan, who was working for the rights of children, especially girls, to be able to be educated in Pakistan. And it, she really suffered for physically brutal attack upon her. And one hopes that after that and her award of the prize, it would have been much more difficult for her to be targeted in that kind of way. There seems to be a certain protection awarded. John, see you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Renee. Carolyn, a wonderful talk and lots of great examples, people to think about who really exemplify, concern for the larger whole. I was interested in Barack Obama's nomination, and then after only being in office for roughly 2 weeks, I think you said, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And then more recently, we've had some individual, trolling for a Nobel Peace Prize by touting their puffed up accomplishments and didn't receive it. So probably further inflaming the desire for a Nobel Peace Prize next year. But the thing that struck me about it was this organization, the Nobel Institute or
No, Nobel Peace Committee.
Nobel Peace Committee. Yeah, they seem to demonstrate a very high level of independent thinking, which is, seems to me to be very unusual in a lot of ways, with American, comparing them to American institutions. But anyway, I was wondering if you could comment on their sort of institutional independence and how that works in their favor.
Well, Nobel very clearly strove to give it that independence. He demanded that, or he in the will, that the whole organization of a peace prize should take place in Norway, not in Sweden, because Sweden had a history of war. Maybe people don't even know that at one time Sweden was all the way down the Danube River and headed towards Istanbul. But so he also set up a committee, but he put an overall responsibility upon the Parliament of Norway. So it's too complicated to talk about, but the Parliament of Norway creates the Parliament, the committee, the kind of 15-member committee that has to manage it all. And then when it comes to they have strict rules about applying, but they have and then in the end the ordinary Parliament of legislature of Norway has some influence, and they can the membership of the organization is much too complex. A long list of about 8 different things: former winners, members of the Norwegian Parliament. It goes on, some honorary members. So they've kept those who participate in the process are kind of kept separate from international politics and political opposition and things like that. And when it comes to actually awarding like the Peace Prize, it is a 5-member committee, just a small committee, and they have about 8 months out of, the figure was the nominations for this past year. It's reaching record proportions of 283 nominations, which are then watered down by the basic committee. And then it's a 5-member committee that actually takes about 9 months to consider, a kind of shorter list. And that, again, keeps it isolated from, a lot of publicity. And it's very interesting. Nobel died on the 10th of December. The organization was founded on the 10th of December. Um, the international piece of, oh, I didn't mention, Eleanor Roosevelt didn't get the prize, but she certainly got the prize for putting the international rights agreement through. And then is one other deadline. Well, they announced the award of the peace agreement on the 10th of November. So they're big dates. So the people who are making the decision have several months to consider the candidates. And that does seem to allow some fairness, and it's not free. It's not free of discord but of course the biggest opposition comes from people outside the organization completely and say, oh, why was he or she doesn't deserve it, or etc. So but it is a process that is kept out of international politics, so that's helpful to it.
Mm. And the people who are part of that committee are fairly anonymous, one would think.
Yes, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think the 15-member committee, which the parliament creates, I think that's public, but once you get down to the consideration of applications, that's all kept very secret, very isolated. And the King of Norway has to be there. He doesn't give it. So it can't be say, oh, this is just something a weak government like Norway, tries to gain status, but he doesn't have anything to do with it. No, there's no, except for the Norwegian parliament, which Nobel said, you've got to trust somebody. And so he he just thought that they would be people of integrity and treat it fairly, the process fairly.
Wonderful. Robert Moore.
Yeah, Carolyn, it is troublesome. Sometimes you think they award a peace prize for one thing a person does, even though they're fermenting war in another area.
Theodore Roosevelt would be a very good example.
He's an example, but also Machado, the current
Yes.
one as well.
Yeah.
I mean, going so far as talking about how Trump should get a Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
Supporting invasion. I mean, it kind of, doesn't it seem like it kind of undermines the idea of the Peace Prize?
Well, he didn't try to ban war in the founding. He didn't try to ban war. He did want to reduce armies, and the possibility at that time, looking back, we can say it was an important issue, abolish standing armies, because that's certainly where we're going down the tubes, is this unbelievable expansion of both support and budget for our army. It's like it's almost being prepared to take over the whole United States. But so he didn't quite go that far. Maybe he just thought that if we can just get diplomacy going more so we can avoid these wars and people have a way out, so to speak. But you're right, the expansion has a danger to it, because it may push too hard on governments that there's a whole question. I think that's where we're right where we are right now. What can we do about the expansion of violence and small wars that seem to but just add to the mix? What can we do about it? Is there any hope for reducing the Chinese, the Russian, the American? And it used to be there was one thing that helped at the turn of the 19th to 20th century is all the old empires were in decline. The Chinese Empire, the Russian Empire, the Muhammad's, the Ottoman Empire in Istanbul, and even you could say the British Empire was moving towards challenge. So all those big empires were collapsing, and they didn't have the funding to carry on they did what they were doing. So that it was a time of change, and fairly radical ideas like abolishing standing armies or promoting fraternity between nations, that all seemed pretty radical, but there were a lot of activists that came out of that period, and that was the good fortune.
Jim, I see your hand.
Just an obvious question, Carol. Thank you very much, by the way. That was very interesting, the way the criteria seem to expand and become more inclusive. But what was the reasoning for the person that rejected accepting the Nobel Peace Prize? Did he
What is
say?
the reason? What is the reason for?
You said someone, the only one person ever refused to accept the Nobel Peace Prize. My question is, did he ever say why?
No, I don't think he would have been allowed to do that because he was representing North Vietnam, and before North Vietnam was sure about, any kind of compromise.
Yeah, if he's North Vietnam, that's a little more understandable.
Yeah. That he and don't.
Yeah.
In other words, it was a statement of non-participation. So if he'd given an explanation, he would be participating in some way, and there could be a debate about that. He was just ignoring the whole thing. Thank you very much, but I will not accept this award. End discussion.
But it would have been for political reasons, one would surmise.
Yeah. I don't think he had opposition.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he was, in a way, trying to make the Peace Prize process part of the Western imperial camp. It was just one more instrument that the West was using to kind of dominate politics.
Well, you know what Plato said, I believe, wasn't the Republic, that why you want the Republic, that he was visualizing to be have a very strong army, but give very little reasons for any other city-state attacking it, because there's nothing to get there. They're so self-disciplined, and they limit themselves in terms of wealth and all that they're therefore not attractive. Why would you want to attack a state that's very strong militarily, but has nothing to give you if you beat it?
Yeah.
So Plato is pointing to the fact that all wars are caused by greed.
Well, that's probably good. I think it's interesting that during the 1930s, there were no winners except for Jane Addams at the beginning, 1931. And then there were no winners. It was not something that Franklin Roosevelt kind of focused on. He had his agenda. It was pretty obvious, and keeping us out of war was one of them. But you could say he didn't do enough to prevent the passage, but maybe nobody could have prevent the rise of Nazism. But but Eleanor Roosevelt was considered, but it kind of, at that time, she was seen as too ideological and too much an instrument of the United States, which is unfair given her, her boat ride with other American delegates was, they were just pouncing on her and thinking she was going to make a mess of things. And here she came through with this terrific victory of the of human rights, and she did it by persuading the Soviets to participate in it, and finding this is what you want. This is something that's in your interest. And so she broke down their initial opposition to such a thing as being a tool for, the capitalist control things. So, but she didn't get enough votes to actually be a winner. So that, and she was too much associated with the United States government.
Interesting. Well, I saw that Diana had her hand up, and also Marianne. So I give Diana the first shot at it.
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much. I didn't know any of that information and I found it very interesting. What struck me was the movement of the criteria. You said that peace was not the absence of war, but nurture of life, and that there was an unfolding life process and a rising moral feeling that made war impossible. And I was just struck by that of looking at what does a world of peace mean, and how do we nurture that. And I was also struck with how do we make it personal. We're hearing about these activities that they're all doing, and what are we doing to bring more peace to our lives and to the world, and how do we do that? And I think that's really important. I also love that they recognized different types of people, the girl and different types of people that, to me, they are connected with countries, but it's amazing to see the evolution of it and to really bring it down to ourselves and say what brings me peace and how do I live peace in my life.
Well, I want to emphasize a little phrase in this quote I read from Jane Addams, that she, it's not something to discuss as abstract dogma. Peace, it must come to be a rising tide of moral feelings. So that's what people need to bring to their consciousness and to their interpretation and their goals in a political sense. A rising tide, but she says it's happening, a rising tide of moral feelings, which is slowly engulfing all pride of conquest and making war impossible. And I think that's, we'll go out on a limb. I think that's what happened in the Vietnam War, as more and more Americans couldn't avoid seeing the body bags coming back and all that. And this is not something we should be fighting. We shouldn't be fighting to save capitalism, et cetera, et cetera. And so we need to unfold life processes which are making for a common development. And that's another thing that, people and governments can get along. They can share in projects and things like that. And the United Nations did come out of this. I mean, and it's struggling to kind of get back in line, I think, with its original, but it doesn't have the apparatus to do much. So, but to recognize this rising tide of moral feeling, that's what has to happen.
Beautiful quote, and thank you for bringing it to us, Carolyn, and Diana for reminding us of it.
Marilyn?
Marianne, I think.
Yes, thank you, Carolyn, for your wealth of response is just deepening your presentation. I wanted to ask about whether there had ever been a an international agency or a person that came from space exploration or our fraternal, if you will, goals to deepen international understanding of the universe, the stars. It just seems like their space station and other programs really did seek that. And I think it can be a place of weaponry and also destruction of, that could lead to more climate change. So I just wondered if there has, in the history, in the 192, ever been anyone or any organization that looked to promote peace in our international starways.
There are books that include quotes from people about how their vision, in fact, I'm just trying to remember something I heard recently, their vision of the cosmos being expanded because of the newest telescope. But the most famous was it the moon vision, where one of the astronauts looked down at our Earth, and it blew his mind. And we still have that, that picture of our universe, of our globe from outer space that's been shared a lot. So I'm assuming that and I just can't remember quotes at this particular time, but yeah, it's I remember just looking through a telescope, the bright one, up at stars and discovering that the one single light was actually a constellation of 6 colored lights. And, how did that happen? So I think you're on a good track. And there are scientists who find, the more they find even about the tiny things of the life of and motion of atoms, are having their materialism challenged.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the Beyond War organization used that, and they gave their own war. They used that image of the rising Earth as their kind of logo for a long time. It was striking, but I don't know anyone who's gotten it for the Peace Prize, but that's interesting. Thank you very much.
Well, you could sign up for going a spaceship ride if you had a lot of money.
But it is one of those more remarkable international endeavors that that we've conducted with individuals side by side from nations who are really almost at each other's throats, and yet we've agreed to conduct these endeavors together in space. So it's a really interesting point that Maya and you are bringing up here.
Well, maybe by the end of the century, we'll have a whole new metaphysics to.
They're building a new space station. Is that going to be international as well?
I don't know. I think it is, but I wouldn't be able to say with complete confidence. I mean, the way it's going is privatization. The U.S. is backing out of a lot of its space activities because it thinks it's still better to have missiles and bombs. As far as that's my political comment for the day.
John?
But the United States has weakened and it has shortened its space objectives because it doesn't see, the people who run it may not see any point to just getting closer to a black hole or something. But they don't understand the dynamic interaction that is going on all the time over millions of miles, billions of miles, I guess. And they just don't have a large enough worldview. And it's kind of sad that here Nobel, he really did want more peace on the globe. And he was horrified how many governments rushed to get more dynamite. And now we have drones and nobody's safe.
Well, let's see if John can pull us up here at the end.
Maybe. Carolyn, do you think, in your opinion, do you think the FIFA Peace Prize will challenge the Nobel Peace Prize?
And remind me of what I've read about it, but remind me of what that FICA prize is.
FIFA Prize was one cooked up by the soccer world, the people who run soccer, and was awarded to President Trump last month.
Yeah. Well, it might get more publicity. And so, I mean, I've listened to a group of athletes recently because there's been all this turmoil about who's in and who's out of the upcoming, but I guess starts tomorrow, the international soccer competition for the year. And it seems like they've really worked hard to kind of make it a peaceful, fraternal event. And so maybe that participation will make an impression that they can take home with them.
That's very hopeful. Thank you so much.
Noticeable at the last Olympic that I watched quite a bit of. One thing is that the managers of it just really cracked down on, a lot of disruption and all that. And the athletes were given firmly the rules of participation. And I think as a result, the whole event went off quite well.
And that was certainly has been one of the intentions of the Olympics, is to bring nations together in friendly competition.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great correlation. Thank you for bringing that up. What I'd like to do is tell you about our upcoming year, just very, very briefly, and our next meeting, just touching on that. And perhaps one of you will offer to give the vote of thanks to Carolyn afterwards. As I mentioned, we are wrapping up the year of Light on the Path. And our theme in next year's almanac, the 2026 almanac, is evolving with the cosmos. Evolving with the cosmos. And so we have a number of themes that I think will contribute to that vision. There's also a lot of looking at all of the different aspects of the natural world. And so when we've looked at all these different aspects of nature, we're also giving in the almanac the Hawaiian word for those, since the Hawaiians are just so very keen on being attuned to and taking care of the land. Malama Ka'aina. And so that's something that we can look forward to. So there will be the rainbow, which is Ka Anuenue, and the rain, Ka Ua, etc., are some of the topics that we'll be taking up in our looking at evolving with the cosmos. Marianne, I see your hand up. Did you want to give our vote of thanks for today?
Mary's hand's up.
Yeah, I would like to, at this last Becoming the Light is year, and thank you, Carolyn, for encouraging us by encouraging us to look at the broader human needs, how our small role, by giving these examples, and by more importantly, your own example and your life, you've been able to dedicate a greater understanding of social movements and humanity, and helping us remember and recognize the importance of peace activism and its extended role. But moreover, thank you for your dedication in your life to keeping social actions forefront. And as we close with positivity and light, I think that's a good thing to see what we do on a daily basis. And you've supercharged me to think that way through the end of the year. Thank you.
Here, here. Beautiful, beautiful. Thanks. And I think all of us join Marianne in extending not just our thanks to you, but our honoring of you for all that you have contributed. We're all very aware of it and just very appreciative. Thank you,
Very
Carolyn.
good. Thank you, Carolyn.
And thank you,
Carolyn.
thank you, Renee, for putting this together. It's just amazing that we can come together and share our ideas and just how you've done it. It's very, talk about peacemaking and understanding. You are an example of that in our lives, and you are very much appreciated. Happy holidays to everybody.
Yes,
Yeah,
happy holidays, everyone.
And it is amazing how much information you can get off the internet very quickly. Like this obscure search you have to go through. Just globalpeaceprize.org. And others.
Aloha.
Aloha. Mhm.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carolyn.